Hi there, welcome back to my channel. This is episode 2 on Sean Turns Up the Volume. And I'm Sean with you today, and I'm going to talk about left leaning political bias in the mental health community as manifest in things like psychology today, particularly things like profiles that people put up to present themselves, that therapists put out there to market themselves, and what their specialties and interests are, and just um, how obvious it is if you are more conservative leaning, if you don't come from that lens. The messaging really comes through that this person is likely a liberal, um, through the kinds of things on their profile and through the sorts of checkboxes and things that you can pick on the website. And so some of the things I wanted to point out as far as this bias are, for one, there's a category that is called allies. And from this category, they have many different things that you can choose from. Different categories from disability to veterans and different things like that. In particular, they've got all the LGBTQ things on there, so you can mark yourself as an ally to bisexuals, ally to gay, ally to intersex, ally to lesbian, ally to non-binary, ally to queer, ally to transgender, ally to sex worker. That's another one that I saw on there on people's profiles as I went through looking at some of my colleagues around the internet, looking up how do other people portray themselves, because there's certainly like a self-consciousness in myself, like, well, um, is there bias there? I feel like I've got to like hide myself in the mental health community as far as having more conservative values and beliefs. And so it's not just like in my head, right, that one side is getting to portray the things that they care about, and it really conveys politics with that, and that the other side really is not. So I do have that self-consciousness that, man, like if I were to put anything on the profile that conveyed anything other than that I'm Christian, there's the faith-based option. Really, anything other than that might be met with ire, hostility, harassment, potentially, maybe get an angry email from someone or an angry phone call. Potentially, that could just be fear, that could just be self-consciousness. Maybe everybody would be good and not do a thing like that. But there is that worry there. Like, what if you stand out and go like, well, I care about these communities too. What about these communities? What about people dealing with conservative kinds of issues? What about people on the right who are dealing with stresses that are different than people on the left, or maybe a mirror image of the things, right? People on the left are feeling marginalized and oppressed, and that's the messaging they're constantly getting and stewing on. And so that's building up more resentment and anxiety and fear and maybe even paranoia about what is going on the right. And so they're thinking that we're hostile and out to get them, or people on the right are dealing with issues of bizarre and new terminology, of language kind of being controlled and dictated from the media and from left wing organizations, where they're trying to change the terms, how we define things, words we can use in language. So people on the right are dealing with the stress that it kind of feels like we're living in 1984 being manifest, dealing with the stress of being accused of being racist, Nazi, fascist, things like that, the pressures of not feeling like they can express their political opinions, that it's okay to make, for someone on the left to make jabs at Trump and Republicans in media, on Facebook, on and TV shows and late night shows, and just all over the place, and even at work with coworkers. The assumption is you can make your jabs, your political jabs at the right, and that, well, surely this person believes what I believe. In fact, I think I've seen plenty of that from people. It seems like people often, at least on the left, assume that everybody agrees with them. They just assume that like their thinking is just the way it is. Like, of course, any reasonable person, just like look at me. I must agree with the things on the left. I mean, there's like certain aspects of things. Obviously, I don't dress, at least when I'm dressing like this, I'm not dressing in like a conservative way, right? Like there's like elements where maybe in the past there's parts where maybe there'd be some mixed views, maybe some aspects of more socially liberal leaning, but economically conservative leanings, or things like that. And yet the left has gone so far away that it just leaves more and more people going, what is happening there? And just moving over or staying in the realm of like sanity, of where people on the right used to be able to debate and disagree with things. So anyway, we'll sidetrack. Back onto course. Anyway, there's these allyship checkboxes. And so there's these ways that you can, I'm an ally to this. And if you're conservative, if you're not on the left, you see that. And we go like, well, for one, they're conveying values. You're conveying your values in that. And someone on the left, well, that's good to be conveying those values. And someone like me who actually thinks like counseling should actually ideally be like perhaps at its best. And I could explore this more. There'd definitely be different perspectives. Like, I think that the blank slate is really like an aspirational place. It may not be, it's not for everyone for sure, but like therapy should be this place where like wherever you're at coming in, you can explore whatever you need to, and the therapist is gonna help guide you through that with good questions and reflections and poking into things that like, where are your blind spots and what are you not seeing? Things like that. Giving you feedback, giving present moment feedback, summarizing things, linking back content from your past and different things you shared, and making connections, exploring and making connections and things. And like anything should be fair game for that. And you should know that your therapist is like going to be on your side for that in any way, that they're coming at you like really neutral and exploring those things. That's an aspirational kind of view of counseling. Certainly there is, so in reality, people do bring other aspects in, spirituality and things. I tell clients like I can offer Christian integration into counseling if people want it. If they don't want it, I'm not talking about it. But if they do, we can talk about that together. So I understand, and I think that is okay. That different views can be integrated in that way. But my point with this is that it's very one-sided in the kind of values that are being conveyed. I can check a box that goes, well, like I do like Christian counseling, and that is like the only thing that might message being of more conservative values, whereas all these like allyship statements are definitely conveying a sense of liberal, left-leaning values. Also within the framework of that, like I would welcome anybody into my office. I've worked with a variety of people, and it's like allyship contains a certain meaning in it. It means, at least to a conservative, it means you're going, yay, pride. We have to celebrate this thing. Our only stance is like all affirmative all the time. It's got to be like joyful. Oh, you're this, whatever your sexuality is, and the response to that is that we're going to get on board just like celebrating that thing. See, that's not actually a neutral therapist stance at all, because it should be for the client to figure out, how do they integrate this into themselves? There's people who are of different faith backgrounds. You might be a Christian, a Mormon, a Muslim, something, where you're trying to figure out, okay, I have homosexual desires, or I have bisexual desires, or I've got this thing inside of me that feels this sense of discomfort, or this sense of wanting to be the opposite sex, drawn to things in the opposite sex. You're a boy drawn to things of the female sex and wanting to maybe even look that way or just that way. Or same likewise for females to be desiring to be a boy. So you've got the gender identity sort of stuff going on. And it's like, man, that deserves a place to be explored, and to be explored safely, and to be explored neutrally, but grounded in reality as well. Okay, so grounded in the body, in science, in truth, right? Like, um, I mean, we know how bodies work, and we know factual things about the biology and the sexes and the difference between sexes and things like that. Um, Things like gay identity is a social construct. Things like believing that in different gender identities and things like that, or that you could be trapped in the wrong body. These are radical, relatively new, and coming from the far left social constructs and particular ways that these things have been framed, like, and presented as this is the way, this is the only way. You must believe it in this way. You must talk about it in this way. And the only perspective to have is that you will celebrate and be really happy about it. Okay. And that's the only perspective you can have. It can't just be like, yeah, you know what? I do have desires like that. Yeah, you know what? I do have homosexual desires like that. And yet I also want to pursue a Christian lifestyle. And that's hard to do. I'm trying to figure that out, figure out the morality of that, figure out what I believe about that. Like, this is just something, a part of me, and I shouldn't feel like ashamed or have to even be hiding this thing about me. And yet that doesn't mean that I have to go to a gay pride celebration and show off my sexuality and something like that, right? You can have desires to be of the opposite sex and drawn towards clothing and look and wanting to dress that way and things like that, and yet that doesn't mean you have to celebrate it as this wonderful thing. It can just be like, yep, that's a thing. I experienced that. I'm trying to work through figuring that out. Grounded in reality, in the sense that, like, and there's no such thing that's going to change what my body is and who I actually am. My real identity is grounded in this biological body, and that's the truth. I have to deal with that. Like, no amount of surgeries, no amount of hormones can change that, what I really am. And so my truth and my authentic identity is actually in coming to terms with this biological body, and I have to come to terms with accepting that. And yet that is what the APA, the counseling and psychology community, has determined as unethical practice, and things that you cannot, like, don't talk about it, don't present it. That's called conversion therapy. Oddly enough, embracing your own body is called conversion. And going along with a social construct that you've developed in your head and that's been pushed onto you from society is called affirmation. That's a little confusing. And conservatives see right through it. And conservatives are dealing with a lot of stress from these radical different societal changes that have been happening very quickly and without much societal dialogue, because they've just been pushed on us. Just like, boom, you believe this. You will say this, you will teach this, you will do this. There's other types on this Psychology Today profiles that come up too. Other checkboxes you can pick as I look through these profiles that convey the liberal bias. LGBTQ plus. So again, that's a category that you can pick. Any conservative seeing that is going to be like, if that's something that they're checking, this is probably a liberal therapist. Feminist, like, that is just a political stance. Feminist rights, like the work for women's rights, it's come a long way over the past 100 years. There's aspects of feminism that I totally approve of, and yet I don't buy the whole thing hook, line, and sinker, just as I wouldn't buy into a whole, like, I don't know, what would the opposite of feminist be? Like, maleist? I don't know. Patriarchy. Actually, really, our household, me and my wife, we're actually, like, super egalitarian in the way that we share chores and in the way that we do life together. And there's aspects of me that are that lean towards more feminine in some ways. I'm a therapist. I'm really sensitive and empathetic and different things. So um, like in practice, in practice, I probably like manifest like a lot of at least maybe I don't know first or second wave aspects of feminism or something. But like then you got these other waves of feminism that like go off the deep end to where men are coming into women's sports and things and different aspects like that where it's like wait what happened to your focus on women? What is going on here? It's been taken captive by even more radical ideology. But that feminist stance is political. I remember from one of my textbooks that feminist theory is a counseling approach that you can do. It's like CBT, I don't know, psychoanalytic, acceptance and commitment therapy. That's something that I do, right? There's like these different. There's Freudian. There's Gestalt. There's things like that, and then there's feminist theory. I'm like, what is going on here? This is literally just a political stance, and it's being called a theory you would practice from with your clients. Like, what if a researcher proposed like Trumpist theory? Would that make it in to a textbook? I don't think so. I don't know what that would be, but I don't think so. And yet this can make it in. Anyway, so yeah, this is a checkbox that you can pick. I specialize in this. Culturally sensitive. I look at that and I go, what does that mean? Right? We're supposed to be sensitive to whatever kind of culture is coming into the room. I want to be respectful to any client coming into the room, right? We have multicultural classes and different things like that. And yet, is my culture as I don't know, white, ethno-European, third generation, conservative, God-believing, gun-toting, strangely God, like male, is it okay to be a male? Am I going to receive sensitivity for that? I can tell you, because I'm going to love to expose things on here, that I have seen things from left-wing therapists, maybe I can't remember if it was trainings or what, but I have seen things talking about from therapists about how they need to be challenging people's like their whiteness and their oppression and things like that in counseling. And that's the bias they're coming from. That's where they're coming from and how they're going to do counseling with their clients. So you come in as a white conservative Christian male, and they're going to have some of these people. And this is something that I came across. This exists. I have seen this, and it was like, oh my gosh, what the heck? That there are people out there, there are therapists out there that have that baked in. In fact, it's probably even wider baked in than even that, but this was very specific, that the approach would be that they would be working with their clients, whoever they may be, to be pushing, trying to lead them to really challenge those aspects of themselves. And it's like, whoa, that your counselor is secretly trying to like undermine you in that way to get you to believe their perspective. And that's a real problem in counseling, because we do all have biases, we do all have perspectives, we have lenses by which we look at the world that shape our views, and it is going to affect the kinds of questions you ask, the kinds of things you hone in on, the kinds of how much energy you put into affirming something or not, how much of that kind of genuineness that's going to come through. If your client says like F Trump, is they're like, yeah, man, he's friggin' oppressive or something like that. I have little doubt, you don't know. I'm not in other people's counseling room, you don't know, but I have little doubt that when Trump won the election, that there were therapists across the country who were making it authentically known that they were very unhappy with their clients about that. I have no doubt about that. Anyway, so that stuff comes through. Is that okay or not? It's happening. They're doing it. Ethically, not really supposed to. And yet there's therapy, aspirational, and then there's therapy in practice. And what really happens in the therapy office, we should all be striving for that aspirational kind of neutral therapy, I think. Um, okay, some other things I see on there are things like sex positive, kink positive. That was those were some things you could click on. I think those were some of the things that I saw because I screenshotted different profiles to go over this. And so again, even in that, it's like, sure, there are kinks. Sure, like sex. Um, Sex is a part of what we do in life, right? And there's different views on where sex is positive and where sex is not positive. Um, there are kinks, there are fetishes, there are different things. I mean, we humans are very weird and sexual creatures in all kinds of strange stuff. Um, and there can be a lot of buried shame there. I might even talk about that more as I have my own experiences in that realm. And so, um, like you've got this going, like these things are positive, but again, that's values messaging. How does somebody read into that? You're already making an assumption that you're putting on the client, like that this is the stance that they take. This is the stance that they take, and actually, and work on things like pornography addiction. And if you read some books on that, you'll find that there are problems as far as therapists not really knowing enough about it, going, well, pornography addiction is not a thing, like you're too maybe self-conscious about it or whatever. You need to just like let yourself use as much porn as you want, and like don't worry about it, like sex positive, no matter what it's doing to your life. There are people who have received that kind of treatment, and that's not helpful. So again, just there's bias there that may not be leftist bias so much. I mean, it's some kind of bias, right? It's conveying a values statement already. It's not unbiased. Body positivity. I am all about embracing and learning to love your body, um, because there can be a lot of shame about the body, and this is the place that is, at least in this life, this is our home. This is where we exist in this time, and having shame about this can lead to just more shame-based behaviors and more things that are not good for the body. I do wonder what really that means, because I've taken some training where I took a training that was talking about how you're just a person in a thin body, or you're just a person in a big body, the different things like that, where the messaging seemed to really minimize control and responsibility over what you're actually doing as far as keeping your body healthy. It seemed to be encouraging a stance of like, well, no, it didn't seem to be. It was conveying a stance that you can be healthy at any weight, and that's simply not grounded in science and reality. Sure, there is a range for human beings um, that can be healthy, but there's certainly a range that is not healthy. This training was downplaying, talking about like not like don't use the term obesity anymore. That you shouldn't like don't even use that label, and challenging that science around obesity isn't real and isn't to be trusted. This is what I was getting through a counseling training that I paid for through PESI, and you got things like that, which are obvious biases. I mean, they're challenging medical science and going, well, here's this other perspective, and they're baking that into a training that then I'm supposed to take to my clients. So again, and that kind of training is not coming from people leaning conservative. That is very left leaning to look at it that way. So again, the bias, when you say something like body positivity, there's some sort of bias there. There is an assumption of positivity. It really comes off as something liberal and left leaning. Spirituality, I don't really know what that means, but it kind of sounds like a left leaning kind of thing. I don't recall from looking if there were other religious things you could choose from on there is as being focuses. But I do remember from another training, I can't remember if I mentioned in the first video I made, um, there was a training where the therapist is mentioning things like chakras, energy, crystals, things like that that they'll bring in the session. And again, I'm like, what is happening here? These things are not scientific at all. These things are not based in best counseling practices for sure. Now, can there be a place, just as I can work with people on their Christian faith and integrate that in the counseling? Is there a place for that? If you're going to integrate other things to relate to your client, like, sure. I don't actually have a problem with that. The point is that I'm just making here is that just the vague term like spirituality does kind of come off to me, if nothing else than that, it's like what's not there, what is not there to choose from is what stands out to me. So I'm like, you read that, you go, I don't know what that means. There's more kind of Eastern mysticism and things. There's more of a rise of things like Wicca and the occult and different things that have been stigmatized in our historically more Christian-leaning society that are coming out and gaining more affirmations, being affirmed in the therapy world. And so that's what I kind of see there. Again, just that one's more subtle, but still just this messaging of leaning to the left. Some more obvious stuff are things like terms like social justice, anti-racist, anti-colonial, social oppression, systemic injustice. These are terms that I've seen on therapist profiles, and that obviously message political, ideological statements. These things were baked into our counseling books. They'd come up in multicultural books and in the multicultural sections of different textbooks and things, because basically every book needs to have their section that is all about LGBT issues, multicultural issues that are coming from a left-wing multicultural view, which is the view of racial oppression, systemic injustice, things like that. These things that have been baking in academia under the radar for a long time, and now in the past 10 years or more have really just been exploding into the mainstream, and leading to all the cries of hate and racism and Nazism against people on the right that then fueled the murder of Charlie Kirk. So I'm just looking at my notes here to see if there was anything else I wanted to say about that. So these sorts of things convey that political messaging, and it stands out to me that there's also what's missing. Like, what are the issues that people on the right care about, that conservatives may be stressed about, that could be playing into their anxieties, into their stresses, that might affect them coming to counseling, or just knowing that their counselor is more sensitive, empathetic, just aware, is not going to be judgmental in these things, right? That they can just come to counseling and know, like, they're not going to be viewed from a lens of, oh, this awful conservative Nazi came into my office, like they're just the worst. You don't want to feel like your therapist is secretly hating you. That's gross and unpleasant, and nobody should have to feel that way in the counseling office. And you do want your counselor to be a fit. And so I get why people who are on the left would look for that liberal messaging, and yet I don't think that the left and my liberal colleagues are really aware of just how it comes off to conservatives. Conservatives are dealing with stress from the mainstream media being overwhelmingly liberal, left-leaning bias, from tech companies, and the government have bias just built into them, to things like DEI trainings and things becoming standard practices being put on people. So there's the irony here is that there's actually something systemic going on, a systemic bias going on, and that is systemic against conservatives. And there's an irony to that, because it's becoming baked into all of these systems. Like, well, of course you're liberal. Well, of course DEI. Um, well, of course systemic justice, and of course, just like white people are the racist, worst, oppressive people, and their culture needs to be destroyed. It's like, well, of course. Well, of course, you believe that too, right? We can just talk this way, and we can do trainings in this way, and we can just bake it right in. We'll just exclude them. They're awful. Let's exclude them. This kind of stuff is baked into media. The anti-right politics are baked into shows like The Boys. If you've ever watched The Boys, the sentiment is very clear about where that writer, the comic book writers, where they feel, what they feel about conservatives and the right. Things like, I've watched the show Wednesday recently, not quite done, and so spoiler alert, but there is a scene that's just blatantly associating some characters with Trump in a less than admirable kind of light. There's also kind of this messaging throughout the show that I've noticed, that normies getting killed is kind of like, no big deal. The person eaten by the zombie, they're a normie. They're probably conservative. They kind of deserved it. That's just like baked right into the show. It's not exactly even subtle, but it's there. Things like the show Andor, where, of course, in Star Wars, in the 70s, the Empire, of course, is space Nazis, right? But this was decades before the liberal left, the progressives, the communists, and the left determined that conservatives need to be called Nazis and described in that way. Anyway, there is a scene that blatantly has a Empire officer. They're basically going after people who are illegal aliens on a planet, and the terminology is used. I think that exact terminology is used, and so there's just this obvious messaging of like, look at the evil conservative, look at the evil ideas of going after these illegal aliens. So it's just baked right in, and so that's what conservatives are living now in a media, in a world where they're just getting this left-wing ideology just pushed on them from every direction, and we're getting tired of it. So that's the bias showing up. There's also the pressure to be bullied into using things like the pronouns, fake pronouns, being forced into gender ideology, as far as thinking that there's some spectrum, as if there's something other than male and female, boys and girls, as if there's like what other things there, right? That there's. And that's baked into profiles, like put in your pronouns, okay? When you see that kind of thing, again, that is a liberal agenda kind of thing baked right in, because conservatives, you don't refer to people you're talking to by their pronouns. Pronouns are actually something you use in reference to other people, typically that aren't even maybe around when you're talking about them. And so actually, at least to a conservative, it comes off as you're trying to control my speech even when you're not around. That's a heck of a control issue right there. That's an authoritarian kind of thing. And so I'll make a separate video on pronouns. I think I've got plenty to say about that. The point is, again, just that the bias is there and baked in. And to someone on the right, it's obvious. To someone on the left, they either don't recognize it, or they go, yeah, but this is actually good in the way society needs to be going. And those evil conservatives need to like get on board. Or, well, I guess, die. That's the messaging we've seen by a lot of people celebrating. That seems to be the sentiment. And so my last point is, I think everybody should have a voice. I think both sides should be able to speak. That good ideas should, we should be able to talk about our ideas, good ideas, bad ideas. There's no such thing as hate speech. All speech should be free. The things that the left call hate speech is just speech that they hate. If you want to silence somebody and don't like the things that they're saying, you probably hate them. Um, you might reflect on that. Do you hate this person because of the things that they're saying? If you're calling them hateful, you need to look in the mirror and look back at yourself. Um, but the way that ideas should be opposed is through dialogue, is through proposing better ideas and concepts and challenging it and debating it and looking for evidence and trying to falsify ideas that are bad, so that the good stuff rises to the top. Um, when it comes to counseling, things should be fair. If you're leaning liberal and you want to message that on your profile because you do, that should be fair to do. And if you're conservative and you want to message that on your profile, you should be able to, because they're already doing it on the left massively. So, you know, ideally, a profile should look really neutral and shouldn't have these subtle or more overt kind of messages, right? Because you should feel like I can go to my counselor and work through anything. But you should also know that they're going to ground you in truth and reality, because reality testing is part of counseling, right? Delusions, distortions, hallucinations, dysmorphias, where you're not being aligned with what is real about reality around you or your body, those should be things that should be discovered and worked through to get more grounded in the reality of the existence we are in, and the body that you are in. And that is not the messaging or the bias coming from the left. And that's where the left go too far and have left the realm, at least in certain areas, of really providing what is good mental health and best practice. And that's a shame. And so I want conservative voices and conservative therapists and professionals to stand up to this and push back more in the therapy and the medical communities, to push back against this kind of stuff. So that's all I've got to say for today. I thank you again for hanging out with me here. I am so bad at doing a short video. I swear I'm going to do like a 5-minute one of these days. But for now, I guess I've got a lot to say. Thank you. If you like this kind of thing, please like and subscribe. And I'll see you next time.